John Wayne Gacy, known as the Killer Clown, was a notorious American serial killer who murdered at least 33 young men and boys between 1972 and 1978 in Illinois. A respected community member who often performed as a clown at local events, Gacy lured his victims to his home under the guise of job offers or social activities. He would then restrain them using a magic trick, sexually assault them, and strangle them to death. Gacy buried 26 of his victims in the crawl space of his home, with others discarded in nearby rivers. He was arrested in 1978 after the disappearance of a 15-year-old, led police to investigate Gacy. A search of his home uncovered human remains, leading to his confession. Gacy was convicted of 33 murders in 1980 and sentenced to death. He was executed by lethal injection in 1994, leaving behind a chilling legacy as one of America's most prolific serial killers. Ted Bundy, one of the most infamous serial killers in U.S. history, killed at least 30 young women across several states between 1974 and 1978. Known for his intelligence and charm, Bundy would often approach his victims in public places, pretending to need help, and then abduct them. His victims were typically college-aged women. Despite his calculated crimes, Bundy evaded capture for years, even escaping custody twice. After his final spree in Florida in 1978, which included attacks on a sorority house, Bundy was arrested and eventually convicted. His trial gained national attention as he represented himself in court. Bundy was sentenced to death and executed in 1989. His case remains infamous for the contrast between his outward charm and the horrific nature of his crimes. In June 2019, Virginia McCullough, then 36, murdered her parents, John and Lois McCullough, in their Great Baddow, Essex home. She poisoned her 70-year-old father with prescription medication and, the following day, fatally stabbed her 71-year-old mother. After the murders, she concealed their bodies within the house and continued living there for 4 years. During this period, she deceived family and friends about her parents' whereabouts, claiming they were traveling or ill, while fraudulently using their finances to support herself and pay off debts. The deception unraveled in September 2023, when concerns raised by the couple's GP about missed medical appointments led Essex police to investigate. Upon searching the property, officers discovered the concealed bodies, and she, emotionless, confessed to murdering her parents.
Cheer off, at least you caught the bad guy.
Israel Keyes was a highly methodical and enigmatic serial killer, active in the United States between 2001 and 2012. Unlike many serial killers, Keyes had no specific victim profile, targeting random individuals of varying ages and genders. He meticulously planned his crimes, often traveling across states to avoid detection. Keyes buried kill kits containing weapons and tools in various locations. Keyes was finally caught in 2012 after abducting and killing an 18-year-old barista from Anchorage, Alaska. He used her debit card, which helped law enforcement track his movements. During his interrogation, Keyes confessed to multiple murders and provided details about his methods, but refused to name all his victims, keeping their identities and locations a mystery. Before facing trial, Keyes committed suicide in his jail cell. His case remains chilling due to his calculated approach, his lack of clear motive, and the unknown extent of his crimes. Herbert Mullin was a California serial killer active in 1972 and 1973, responsible for 13 murders in Santa Cruz County. Suffering from severe paranoid schizophrenia, Mullin believed his killings were necessary to prevent catastrophic earthquakes, claiming he received telepathic messages directing him to commit the murders. His victims included strangers, acquaintances, and even a priest, chosen seemingly at random. Mullin's erratic behavior and lack of a consistent pattern initially baffled investigators. He was eventually arrested after shooting a man on his property and leaving evidence that linked him to the crime. During his trial, Mullin's mental illness became a central issue, but he was found legally sane and convicted of 10 murders. Mullin was sentenced to life in prison, where he remained until his death from natural causes on August 18, 2022, at the age of 75. His case is remembered for its unsettling connection between mental illness and violence. Jeffrey Dahmer was an American serial killer active between 1978 and 1991. He murdered 17 young men and boys, most of whom he lured to his apartment under false pretenses. Dahmer's crimes went undetected for years, partly due to his reserved demeanor and his ability to evade suspicion. In 1991, Dahmer was finally caught when one of his intended victims escaped and alerted police. A subsequent search of his apartment revealed incriminating evidence that linked him to the murders. Dahmer was convicted in 1992 of 16 murders and sentenced to life in prison. He expressed remorse for his actions and sought spiritual guidance while incarcerated. Dahmer died in 1994 after being attacked by a fellow inmate. His case remains one of the most infamous in American history due to its psychological complexity and the failures in the justice system that allowed him to remain active for so long. Dennis Rader, known as the BTK Killer, bind, torture, kill, terrorized Wichita, Kansas, between 1974 and 1991. He murdered 10 people, including men, women, and children, by binding, torturing, and strangling them in their homes. Rader took pleasure in taunting the police and media with letters and detailed descriptions of his crimes, seeking notoriety. Despite his horrific acts, Rader led a double life as a family man and church president, which helped him evade suspicion for years. His downfall came in 2004, when he resumed sending taunting messages after a long hiatus. In one of his communications, Rader asked police if they could trace a floppy disk back to him. Authorities replied, falsely, that they could not, and Rader sent the disk. Investigators used metadata from the floppy disk to trace it to his church, leading to his arrest in 2005. DNA evidence linked him to the murders, and he confessed in detail during his trial, receiving 10 consecutive life sentences. Gary Ridgeway, known as the Green River Killer, is one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history. Active mainly during the 1980s and 1990s, he murdered at least 49 women, though he later confessed to killing over 70. Ridgeway targeted vulnerable women, often sex workers in the Seattle area, strangling them and disposing of their bodies near the Green River. Ridgeway evaded capture for decades, but in 2001, advancements in DNA technology linked him to several victims through evidence collected in the 1980s. After his arrest, Ridgeway cooperated with authorities, leading them to more victims' remains. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole in 2003.